Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the final episode of our journey through the Daily Chess, Chess.com's 2021 Daily Chess Championships. A very, very fun competition. I actually extremely enjoyed it. I'll probably do it next year if I have the time. So this was the final game. This was against the number one seed. This particular game, as you know, was a must win for me, as I needed to try and ensure and secure my spot into the next round. But of course, with it being only one person qualifying in a group of eight, or actually a group of 12, I should say, the to get to the next round, it was extremely difficult. So let's have a look at this particular game. So I was playing on the white side. It was e4 was played, c6, d4, d5, e5, bishop to f5, knight to f3, e6, and I go for this setup. This is known as the short variation. It looks quite passive. In actual fact, this is actually one of the mainline positions for white. A lot of the top grandmasters are playing it, just simply because it's a sort of slow build-up position. White essentially restricts all of black's counterplay and slowly squeezes them off the board, which is why it's quite popular at the top levels. And for a caro-kann player, there's not a huge amount you can do about that. It's just unfortunate that you're going to most likely get squeezed off. But in this particular game, my opponent played quite an aggressive way against the system, so he now plays c5 immediately. And this variation is generally not brilliant for black, although it's the second most popular continuation. The reason why it's not so good is because after bishop e3, I'm now threatening to capture this pawn. And there's not a whole lot that black can really do about that. You can play something like maybe queen to b6, maybe that's an option. White can sacrifice this pawn if he wants to, but it starts to get a bit ugly after knight to b5. Notice here that I've got this lovely fork against the king. So the king's going to have to either move, and I think black's got a comfortable edge in this particular position. So going back. So really, the best move for black is just to capture the pawn. And now the knight captures, and I guess it's the mainline position of this particular variation. I take back, I'm now got my knight centralised. I'm potentially threatening now to capture this bishop. And here my opponent played bishop to g6. The best move is actually knight to e7. This is a very interesting move. The idea is obviously if I capture here, he captures back. He's got his knight in the centre, and he's also then attacking my bishop. So pretty good for black. But he decides to move his bishop back to g6, so delaying the development of his bishop. I then castle, and he puts his knight onto e7. So we're out of book now. It's time to sort of fight the position by ourselves here. There is only 2 games from this position. The first game, both of them are draws, but they were either knight to c3 or c4. And I like the look of c4. I thought, okay, let's try and open up the centre. I've got, I would say, slightly better development on my opponent, so it's in my best interest to do so. And also with c4, I can then play knight to c3 without having to think, oh no, I need to play c4 at some point, but I can't because my knight's there. So I put c4 here. His knight came to c6. I now develop my knight to c3. It says it's a mistake on the computer. The reason why is there's actually this very long continuation that I didn't see, lo and behold, but it's still actually an interesting continuation. So after c takes d5, queen takes d5, you've got this knight to b5 move, which is a bit of an annoying move. You're essentially threatening to come to c7, forking both the king and the rook. Okay, the queen can capture here on e5. Knight d2, so actually threatening to come to c4 and just kick this queen around the board. So let's say knight comes to d7, very important move. This creates an escape square for this queen. Potentially come to b8, knight to b4, the queen will come back. And yeah, you've got a very enjoyable position for the loss of the pawns. So just to kind of just slightly continue a bit further down this line, you know, you can enter in this sort of position. Black's king can no longer castle, and you can now win back that pawn that you lost earlier in the position. So a very nice continuation that I missed, of course, because you know it's a little bit difficult to potentially see. But going back to here, also, you know, knight pawn takes here is also playable. You know, then I just get my knight out, and I've got an isolated pawn that I can play against in this position. So it's certainly also a very nice variation for me as well. But in the game, I decided to put my knight to c3 instead. Bishop came to e7, and here I played f4. And it says here it's a missed win. Again, the variation quite difficult to spot, and I'm not too sure really how white is totally winning. It's a bit, as I say, it's a bit difficult to see. So c takes d5 is the best move. Again, if e takes d5, you can play f4 now, so threatening to come here and win the bishop. Maybe there'll be a couple of swaps off here, or even I think actually bishop to e4 looks a little bit better in my opinion. And after this, you can then capture this this bishop, and this is kind of this weird variation. You're going to put the knights to f5. I think actually knight to b5 is a bit better because you can threaten this, and essentially the threat is you're going to maybe try and swap off the queens, and if he takes back the actually, would take back the bishop, I suppose. I guess that defends c7. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure why white is winning so well in this position. Queen to b3. Let me just go down a little bit further into this variation just to have a look. I guess white has got quite a good amount of control in the position. The material is equal. He's got this nice pawn wedge, and I suppose he's going to probably win this this pawn on e4. So maybe that's why. I'm just surprised. You know, I'm looking at the engine. It's saying +3 for white, so quite significant advantage. But okay, so I didn't play f4 anyway in the actual game. I played f4. That's the actual move I played. It says c takes d5. You know, castles. Here I took bishop comes to c5. This is actually the best move, and I chickened out in this position. I thought about capturing this knight. I was really worried about all the pins because notice this king, because I played f4. Now this king's going to come under attack. But in actual fact, this is the best move by a long shot. If knight captures here, there's a long continuation again. I guess I just didn't really see it, or I couldn't really calculate it out to a satisfying finish. But c to b5, so now defending the knights. Queen can come to b6, so now re-attacking. So you've got 3 attackers. You've got against it 3 defenders. And after move like rook to c1, rook a to d8. Bear in mind in this position we're up a knight, so you know black is going to have to try and find the sort of really accurate moves here. You could do an exchange sacrifice here now. After queen here, you can then jump the knight into to d6. So this is the really strong line that I missed again in this particular game. So going back, instead I decided to push my pawn forward, which is probably not the best move. Although this pawn, I should say, does cause some problems for black. The challenge is I'm not going to be able to really defend this knight now. The queen comes to b6. I tried to put my knight to b5 here. I could also do a4, which is really strong actually. Something I didn't see in my in the continuation. I guess after this move is annoying, because now after you capture this, bishop captures here is a nice intermezzo move, so you then capture back here. So after this, I still up a pawn in this variation. Actually, I've still got a nice edge, so that's something I didn't consider either. But I put my knight to here. I thought, okay, maybe I can come up with some counterplay on c7. So he does play a6, c7. I tried to go down this confusing line, but it doesn't really work. His rook comes up to a7, so it avoids being at the capture. I tried to defend this knight the best I could, getting out of the way, and maybe I could get the rook along if he doesn't see it. But now he starts swapping off everything. I'm just down. I'm down a piece for a pawn, so not particularly good. The only compensation, I guess, like saving grace in this position, is I do have this very, very nasty looking pass pawn that I could potentially push. But you know, once this knight falls, it's going to be very difficult to push it through. But let's see what happens now. So knight to c6. I put my rook to d1. Bishop comes to e3. I put my bishop to d3, so try and exchange off bishops. His queen comes here. I put my queen to c2. It doesn't like this continuation, but I honestly, the variation of capturing the queen is just not good at all. You're just swapping off pieces and just getting a poor endgame. I'm not entirely convinced by that line, so I decided to play this. He then captures another pawn. Bishop comes to b6, so he's now looking to get rid of this knight and then hopefully round up this pawn relatively easily. But I decided to try and come up with cheap tactics here. I'm down, as you can see, a clear piece, so it's very, I've just got to come up with any counterplay. Here he now pushes g6, so at least I've created some dark square weaknesses. And I put my rook to f3. His knight comes to d4. Allowing me to start swapping off some pieces and now create a bit of pressure on this f7 pawn. And here, my opponent captures, I took back, and we reach a very critical point in the game where my opponent had I would say, quite a good position, but he needs to be extremely careful here. The best move is playing rook a to a8, and then followed by c8 here to then try and at least stop the pawn. Maybe he could try and round it up very slowly with the knight coming around here to then attack the pawn. So that's probably Black's best plan. If I ever move one of these rooks, that frees up this rook to then come around to e7. He's going to win the pawn eventually. He's going to have a very good position. But in the game, my opponent played quite a big blunder. And it's quite a nice tactic that I then found in this game to then win it. So he plays b5 here. This is a clear blunder, as now it allows me a very comfortable winning tactic here. So if you want to pause the video, see if you could try and solve it. A very nice tactic by white. So here I captured on f7. A really nice move. So Black really hasn't got anything he can do here. The problem with him capturing with the rook now is, well, there's two ways I can play this. I can either just promote straight away to a queen, which I think is pretty decent. That still wins. But I can also capture here as well. If the rook captures, which he has to do, I take here. I've now got a winning position. I've got a rook versus a knight. This should be a comfortable conversion in the endgame. But going back, so after this, I guess other moves that he plays, what he actually plays in the game is rook to c8 now. Trying to round up this pawn, but I have this lovely move, rook to f8. Very, very nice move. His king comes to g7. There's nothing he can do. If he captures with the rook, I take back with a check. He takes back. I promote to a queen. It's a pretty easy win. And when I go to a queen, I can then pick up this knight the following move after the check. So, a very devastating tactic indeed. King came to g7. I threw my other rook over. King came to h8. I then captured here. I was going to actually just start to do stuff like this. Knight came to b4. Rook came to h8. And here my opponent just decided to resign. I've got a simple threat here. I'm either going to capture this, and then I'm going to maybe push this pawn to c8 and just be up a clear queen. So, yeah, a very, very lucky escape there. Just goes to show, the power of the pass pawn. If I go back to the position you've got to, where is it now? I think it was, where are we? If I go back just a little bit, these pass pawns, you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful. There's so many tactics that can emerge from pawns that reach the 7th rank. So, as I say, I think I got extremely lucky in this one, able to win it. But was it enough to win my group and qualify? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a final part to this to sort of show you my results. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon in the final episode. Take care. Bye-bye.